There once was a blind man who decided to visit Texas. When he arrived on the plane, he felt the seats and said, "Wow, these seats are big." The person next to him answered, "Everything is big in Texas." When he finally arrived in Texas, he decided to visit a restaurant. Upon arriving in the restaurant, he ordered a beer and got a mug placed between his hands. He exclaimed, "Wow, these mugs are big." The waiter replied, "Everything is big in Texas." After a couple of beers, the blind man asked the waiter where the bathroom was located. The waiter replied, "Second door to the right." The blind man headed for the bathroom, but accidentally missed the second door. Instead, he entered the third door, which led to the swimming pool, and fell into the pool by accident. Scared to death, the blind man started shouting, "Don't flush, don't flush." During my checkup, I asked the doctor, "Do you think I'll live a long and healthy life then?" He replied, "I doubt it somehow. Mercury is in Uranus right now." I said, "I don't go in for any of that astrology nonsense." He replied, "Neither do I. My thermometer just broke." A man was walking on the sidewalk and noticed up ahead that little Johnny was wearing a red fireman's hat and sitting in a red wagon. It appeared that the wagon was being pulled slowly by a large Labrador retriever. When he got closer to the lad, he noticed that Johnny had a rope tied around the dog's test, which probably accounted for why the dog was walking so gingerly. Smiling, he spoke to the little boy. "That's really a nice fire engine you have there, son, but I'll bet the dog would pull you faster if you tied that rope around his neck." "Yeah," Johnny replied, "but then I wouldn't have a siren." 3 tourists climbed up the tower with London's Big Ben and decided to throw their watches off the top, run down the stairs, and try to catch them before they hit the ground. The first tourist threw his watch, but heard it crash before he had taken 3 steps. The second threw his watch and made only 2 steps before hearing his watch shatter. The third tourist threw his watch off the tower, went down the stairs, bought a snack at a shop up the street, and walked slowly back to Big Ben in time to catch the watch. "How did you do that?" asked one of his friends. "My watch is 30 minutes slow." The coach grimaced as he watched his young ice hockey team. At one point during the game, he called one of his 7-year-old players aside and asked, "Do you understand what cooperation is? What a team is?" The little boy nodded affirmatively. "Do you understand that what matters is not whether we win or lose, but how we play together as a team?" The little boy nodded once more. "So," the coach continued, "I'm sure you know that when a penalty is called, you shouldn't argue, curse, attack the referee, or call him a peckerhead. Do you understand all that?" Again, the little boy nodded. He continued, "And when I call you off the ice so that another boy gets a chance to play, it's not good sportsmanship to call your coach dumb, is it?" The little boy nodded yet again. "Good," said the coach. "Now go over there and explain all that to your mother." A man goes to a new store to get some toilet paper. He approaches the clerk and asks if are there any brands he recommends. "Why, yes, sir. I make all my own products and weave something to suit everybody. This one I call Bob Ross." "Why have you named it that?" "'Cause it's so gentle. You will feel so relaxed and nice afterwards, sir." "Okay, sounds good. What others have you got?" "This next one, probably my best. I call it Jesus, sir." "Oh, wow! How come you named it that?" 'Cause it's so soft, you will feel like it's in heaven. Excellent. I'll take one of those as well. What's that one at the back? I almost missed it. Oh, you don't want that one, sir. Believe me. I'm curious. What is it? That one I call Iron Mike. Why do you call it that, may I ask? 'Cause it's so rough and tough, it doesn't take from anyone. 5. A senior citizen says to his 85-year-old buddy, "So I hear you're getting married?" "Yep. Do I know her?" "Nope." "Is she good looking?" "Not really." "Can she cook?" "Nope. Can't cook." "Does she have a lot of money?" "Poor as a church mouse." "Well then, is she good in bed?" "I don't know." "Then why on earth do you want to marry her?" "Because she can still drive." A man decides to get a facelift for his birthday, spending $5,000 and feeling great about the results. On his way home, he stops at a newsstand to buy a paper. Before leaving, he asks the clerk, "Mind if I ask how old you think I am?" The clerk replies, "I'd say about 35. The man grins. "Actually, I'm 47, he says, feeling even better. Later, he stops at a fish and chip shop to celebrate and asks the same question. "Oh, you look about 29, the worker replies, making him feel fantastic. At the bus stop, he asks an elderly woman the same question. She replies, "I'm 85 and my eyesight isn't great, but when I was young, there was a sure way to tell a man's age. If I put my hand down your trousers and feel around for 10 minutes, I'll know your exact age." With no one around, he thinks, "Why not?" and lets her proceed. 10 minutes later, she says, "You're 47 years old." Stunned, the man asks, "That's incredible. How did you know?" The old lady replies, "I was behind you in the fish and chip shop." A man saw a gorgeous flight attendant sitting alone reading a paper in an international airport. He couldn't quite pinpoint the exact airline, but he wanted to show off as a man of the world. He tried by saying Air France's old motto, "Making the sky the best place on earth." The stewardess gave him the side eye but otherwise ignored him. Undeterred, he tried Singapore Airlines. A great way to fly. Again, he is received with icy silence. He decides to go for one last gamble with Cathay Pacific. Move beyond. The stewardess, fuming by this point, slammed down her paper, turned right to him and yelled, "What do you want?" "Aha!" The man cried in realization. "Countess!" Mrs. Smith, known for her caring nature and knack for explaining even the trickiest concepts, decides to introduce her third-grade class to the basics of biology. She says, "Today, we're going to talk about animals and their unique characteristics. For example, did you know humans are the only animals capable of stuttering?" An enthusiastic girl named Emma waves her hand excitedly and says, "Mrs. Smith, I had a cat that stuttered." The class giggles, and Mrs. Smith, amused, encourages Emma to share her story. Emma begins, "Well, one sunny afternoon I was playing with my cat, Mia, in the garden. Suddenly, our neighbor's big Rottweiler jumped over the fence." The class falls silent, and Mrs. Smith leans in, intrigued. Emma continues, "Mia arched her back, her fur all puffed up, and she started stuttering. But before she could finish, the Rottweiler had already eaten her." The class erupts into laughter, while Mrs. Smith tries to hold back a smile. 9. On a warm spring afternoon, two elderly gentlemen reunited after many years. They'd been close in their youth, but life had taken them on different paths. Now, by chance, they were face to face again. "Hey, old friend, long time no see," one called out with a grin, and they hugged, reminiscing about old times. "So, how have you been?" one finally asked. The other hesitated, then said, "Oh, my eyes aren't as sharp and my legs don't work quite like they used to. But I try not to complain. What about you?" The friend chuckled. "I hear you. I think I'm getting weaker too. Used to be able to keep my morning pep down with one hand. Now I need both." A kindergarten teacher is trying to explain to her class the definition of the word definitely. To make sure the students have a good understanding of the word, she asks them to use it in a sentence. The first student raised his hand and said, "The sky is definitely blue." The teacher said, "Well, that isn't entirely correct, because sometimes it's grey and cloudy." Another student says, "Grass is definitely green." The teacher again replies, "If grass doesn't get enough water, it turns brown, so that isn't really correct either." Finally, Billy raises his hand and asks the teacher, "Do farts have lumps?" The teacher looked at him and said, "No, but that isn't really a question you want to ask in class discussion." So Billy replies, "Then I definitely just shit my pants." The Pope was taking a stroll in Rome and come across two beggars, sitting a few feet apart. One of them is holding a Catholic cross, while the other one holds a Hindu Om. He looks at their earnings and sees that the beggar with the Om doesn't have a single cent in his bowl, while the one holding the cross has his bowl overflowing with euros, along with a plastic bag that's full of euro coins, as well as notes. The Pope silently walks to the beggar with the Om symbol and says, "Son, don't you understand that this is a Catholic majority city? You cannot ask for alms using a symbol of some other religion. Certainly not when another beggar sitting near you has a Catholic cross. Not only will people not give you anything, but they will also, in fact, give more alms to the other beggar just to disappoint you." The beggar with Om looks at the Pope. Then he looks at the beggar with the cross, starts laughing and says, "Jignesh, bro, see this. He is teaching us business." A team of Swedes and a team of Norwegians are hired one day to put up telephone poles. Their manager explains to them how to drive the poles into the ground and leaves them to their work while he goes off to attend to other business. At the end of the day, he comes back to see what progress has been made. First, he sees that the Norwegian team has put up 15 poles. "For a job well done," he says, "you are the fastest working team I've ever seen." He turns to where the team of Swedes is working and notices that they have not made nearly as much progress. Yet despite this, they seem to be quite proud of themselves. The manager says to the Swedes, "How can it be that you only managed to put up 3 telephone poles? The Norwegians over there set up 5 times as many in the same amount of time. Don't you know?" A man from the Swedish team responds, "Well, yeah, sure they did. But look at how far the tops of theirs are sticking out of the ground." 4 men are in T hospital waiting room because their wives are having babies. A nurse goes up to the first guy and says, "Congratulations, you're the father of twins." "That's odd," answers the man. "I work for the Minnesota Twins." A nurse says to the second guy, Congratulations, you're the father of triplets. That's weird, answers the second man. I work for the 3M company. A nurse tells the third man, Congratulations, you're the father of quadruplets. That's strange, he answers. I work for the Four Seasons Hotel. The last man is groaning and banging his head against the wall. What's wrong? The others ask. I work for 7-Up. A shepherd was herding his flock in a remote pasture when suddenly a brand new BMW advanced out of the dust cloud towards him. The driver, a young man in a Brioni suit, Gucci shoes, Ray-Ban sunglasses and YSL tie, leaned out the window and asked the shepherd, If I tell you exactly how many sheep you have in your flock, will you give me one? The shepherd looked at the man, obviously. A yuppie then looked at his peacefully grazing flock and calmly answered, Sure. The yuppie parked his car, whipped out his IBM ThinkPad, and connected it to a cell phone. Then he surfed to a NASA page on the internet, where he called up a GPS satellite navigation system, scanned the area, and then opened up a database and an Excel spreadsheet with complex formulas. He sent an email on his BlackBerry and, after a few minutes, received a response. Finally, he prints out a 130-page report on his miniaturized. Printer then turns to the shepherd and says, You have exactly 1586 sheep. That is correct. Take one of the sheep, said the shepherd. He watches. The young man selects one of the animals and bundles it into his car. Then the shepherd says, If I can tell you exactly what your business is, will you give me back my animal? Okay, why not? Answered the young man. Clearly you are a consultant, said the shepherd. That's correct, says the yuppie. But how did you guess that? No guessing required, answers the shepherd. You turned up here, although nobody called you. You want to get paid for an answer I already knew to a question I never asked, and you don't know crap about my business. Now, give me back my dog. An engineer, physicist, and mathematician have been imprisoned. At some point, the warden realizes that the three men haven't been fed in a while. He accompanies an officer to check up on them. The warden and officer arrive at the first cell that contained the engineer. To their astonishment, the cell was empty and the wall had a hole in it. How is that possible? Said the officer. That wall was solid concrete. The warden quietly inspected the cell. After a few minutes, he exited and said, He seems to have built a pick out of the eating utensils we gave him and used it to make the hole. The warden and officer continued to the next cell that contained the physicist. However, he too was gone. And once again, there was a hole in the wall. And of course, the warden inspected the cell and returned after a few minutes. The warden declared, According to the papers on his bed, he very carefully calculated the weakest point on the wall and repeatedly hit it with a rock until it broke open. Finally, they arrived at the last cell that contained the mathematician. Unfortunately, he lay dead on the cell floor from starvation. The officer sighed. After the other two, I would have expected he would have also escaped. He also has some papers on his bed. The warden entered the cell and picked up the papers. Then he shook his head and chuckled. "It appears," the warden said, "that he spent several days writing a very detailed proof that it was possible to break the wall." A doctor from the inner city was conversing with an old friend from medical school at a cafe when he said, "Man, can I tell you something?" His friend nods. "Sure." "Okay, so the other day I had this one really hot foreign patient, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about her since." He goes on to tell his friend everything about her, from her long blonde hair and ability to speak fluent French, to her shimmering blue eyes and soft skin. His friend seemed more disgusted with each passing moment. "Dude, that is not cool." The doctor, indignant, defended himself. "What's wrong with that? Lots of doctors are attracted to their patients." His friend simply shook his head and replied, "Maybe, but I guarantee you none of those doctors were pediatricians." A young man met a beautiful girl and agreed to spend the night with her for $500. So they did. Before he left, he told her that he did not have any cash with him, but that he would have his secretary write a check and mail it to her, calling the payment rent for apartment. On the way to his office, he regretted what he had promised, deciding that the whole event was not worth the price. So he had his secretary send DA check for $250 and enclosed the following note. "Dear Madam, enclosed. Fine check in the amount of $250 for rent of your apartment. I am not sending the amount agreed upon because when I rented the apartment, I was under the impression that 1. It had never been occupied. 2. That there was plenty of heat. 3. That it was small enough to make me cozy and feel at home. Last night, however, I found it had been previously occupied, that there was no heat and it was entirely too large." Upon receipt of the note, the girl immediately returned the check for $250 with the following note. "Dear Sir, first of all, I cannot understand how you expect a beautiful apartment to remain unoccupied indefinitely. As for the heat, there is heat if you know how to turn it on. Regarding the space, the apartment is indeed of regular size, but if you don't have enough furniture to fill it, please don't blame the landlady. 18. One Friday mo. Warning. A teacher came up with a novel way to motivate her class. She told them that she would read a quote, and the first student to correctly identify who said it would receive the rest of the day off. She started with, "This was England's finest hour." Little Susie instantly jumped up and said, "Wonder Churchill." "Congratulations," said the teacher. "You may go home." The teacher then said, "Ask not what your country can do for you." Before she could finish this quote, another young lady belts out, "John F. Kennedy." "Very good," says the teacher. "You may go." Irritated that he has missed 2 golden opportunities, little Johnny said, "I wish those little would just shut the Upon overhearing this rude comment, the outraged teacher demanded to know who said it. Johnny instantly rose to his feet and said, "Bill Clinton. I'll see you Monday." Little Johnny kept disrupting his 3rd grade class by regularly letting loud farts. His teacher kept him after school. When she insisted on knowing why he exhibited such offensive behavior, little Johnny said, "I do it because I can do it better than anybody, and I'm very proud of that fact." The teacher says, "If I show you I can do it better than you, will you stop?" Little Johnny agreed, and the teacher placed 2 pieces of paper on the floor with identical piles of chalk dust on each one. Johnny dropped his pants, squatted down, farted, and blew all but a tiny little speck of dust off the paper. The teacher dropped her pants, lifted her skirt, squatted down, and farted, but when she was done, there wasn't a trace of chalk dust left on the paper. Johnny was astonished and asked if he could see her do it again. She was willing, and as she repeated the process, "No wonder you won," he exclaimed indignantly. "You've got a double barrel." Why? A lawyer was sitting in his office late one night when Satan appeared before him. The devil told the lawyer, "I have a proposition for you. You can win every case you try for the rest of your life. Your clients will adore you, your colleagues will stand in awe of you, and you will make embarrassing sums of money. All I want in exchange is your soul, your wife's soul, your children's souls, the souls of your parents, grandparents, and parents-in-law, and the souls of all your friends and law partners." The lawyer thought about this for a moment, then asked, "So what's the catch?" A man is eating soup at a busy restaurant when he accidentally drops his spoon. Annoyed, he thinks, "Great, by the time I get a new spoon, my soup will be cold." He flags down a waiter and explains. The waiter immediately pulls a spoon from his vest pocket and hands it over. "Here you go." "Wow, that was quick," the man says, noticing that all the waiters have spoons in their pockets. "Why do you all carry spoons like that?" the waiter replies. "Well, an efficiency expert came in last week and found that spoons are the most commonly dropped utensil. So now we each carry a spare to save time and improve service." The man continues his meal, but then notices a piece of hanging out of the waiter's fly. Looking around, he realizes all the waiters have one. Curious, he calls his waiter back and asks, "What's with the string?" The waiter explains, "Ah, that's another idea from the efficiency expert. He discovered that the most time wasted was washing hands after using the restroom. So now we have a string tied to, ourselves. When we need to go, we just unzip, pull the string, and handle our business without touching anything. No need to wash our hands." The man thinks about this and asks, "That makes sense. But how do you get it back in without touching it?" The waiter leans in and whispers, "I don't know about the other guys, but I use the spoon." The horse's trainer meets him before the race and says, "All you have to remember with this horse is that every time you approach a jump, you have to shout, 'Ollie, oop,' really loudly in the horse's ear. Providing you do that, you'll be fine." The jockey thinks the trainer is mad, but promises to shout the command. The race begins, and they approach the first hurdle. The jockey ignores the trainer's ridiculous advice, and the horse crashes straight through the center of the jump. They carry on and approach the second hurdle. The jockey, somewhat embarrassed, whispers, "Ali oop" in the horse's ear. The same thing happens. The horse crashes straight through the center of the jump. At the third hurdle, the jockey thinks, "It's no good, I'll have to do it," and yells, "Ollie oop!" really loudly. Sure enough, the horse sails over the jump with no problems. This continues for the rest of the race, but due to the earlier problems, the horse only finishes third. The trainer is fuming and asks the jockey what went wrong. The jockey replies, "Nothing is wrong with me. It's this horse. What is he, deaf or something?" The trainer replies, "Deaf? Deaf? He's not deaf. He's blind.